Hello, everyone. This is Dr.SHIVA Ayyadurai, and we're going to have a discussion today why the ruling class needs you in one of these four buckets. So what are those buckets? The first bucket is to try to put you into being in the left. In England, they call it the Labour Party. In India, it's the Congress Party. In America, it's a Democratic Party. I'm sure in Australia, it's some other party. But in any of these countries, there's a left-wing movement. And by the way, there's a not-so-obvious establishment version of that too. So they take all the working people and they want to take one section of those working people and put them into the left wing. What's the next bucket? The next bucket is to put people into the right wing. Again, it's the Tory party in England. In the United States, you can call it the Republicans. In India, it's the BJP. And I'm sure in other countries, it's different. We need to understand. So these are two of the establishment's buckets to put you in the left or put you into the right on every issue. They have their talking points. So when a gun incident takes place, one wing immediately says, I want to keep my guns. And the other wing says, I want to take away your guns. So on. Pro and anti on every issue. But that's one way of splitting working people up. And notice the establishment, by the way, both wings of the ruling class all hang out together. They party together. We saw this in the United States with Tucker Carlson. He's writing letters to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, to get a recommendation letter for his son, right? So they're all one incestuous group. Outwardly, they'll play this game. And if you're not smart enough or have not been trained, you'll think, oh, I'm going to take the right wing position or the left wing, but they don't give a damn about you. They're actually part of the same family. So left wing and right wing is one way. And by the way, as Ken says, yes, we have open houses on Thursday at 11 a.m. as well as at Thursdays at 8 p.m. What are the other two buckets? The other bucket is a very interesting one. It's apathetic and isolationist. So you notice there's people you'll meet. They'll say, well, I tried to vote and it doesn't work, or I was a Democrat and then I became a Republican. I don't believe in any. I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to go take care of my family. That's all I care about. I'm going to just take care of my home, my garden. I got my things and that's it. So that's the other group that the establishment wants people in, to be apathetic and to be isolationist. They want people to give up. Left wing, bucket one, right wing, bucket two, apathetic, isolationist, bucket three. And in all of these, the establishment wins big time because they got the left wing and the right wing. Again, these are working people, electricians, plumbers, mothers, educators. Those of us who actually work for a living have to go out and earn money each day, fighting against each other. And then when people get tired of that, they want them to go into the apathetic, isolationist bucket. But there is a fourth bucket, which actually allows the establishment to suppress freedom. That bucket is domestic terrorists. The establishment loves when members of the working class get so desperate, they take to violence, terrorist violence. They go shoot up a school. And if you look at many of these quote unquote kids who are shooting up these schools, many of them are not destitute people. Go look at their backgrounds. They come from working class backgrounds, but they're part of this group of people who had given up on the political system. They just were so desperate. They use some weaponry to go just cause havoc. They just give up. Now, if you look at the percentage of these, you'll find out it's roughly about this. It's about 25% are left wing, 25% are right wing. If you notice, why is every election so close? 51 to 49, right? 52 to 48%. If you take Massachusetts, around the 5 million people who are in Massachusetts, 2.5 million registered eligible voters, only 2.5 million of them even vote. And they're split into left wing and right wing, including independents, because they'll lean left or right. And then the other 50%, 2.5 million people in Massachusetts don't even bother to vote. But the establishment counts on about 0.1%, which would be about 300,000 people, who they know at some point they're going to go off the handle and they will do something really violent. Some people say, oh, there's a conspiracy, false flags, etc. I don't know about that, but I do know when you look at the statistics, you don't even need to go there. There is enough people who are in that domestic terrorist desperate category who will just go off. In the work of Kathleen Newman, who did a thing on Gun Rampage, she showed very clearly that one of the factors that leads to this violent situation is that school teachers and authorities are looking the other way. They know something's wrong, but they look the other way. But the bottom line is, when you look at the four buckets here, you see left wing, right wing, two people arguing all day, the apathetic and the isolationist, about 49.19%, and the very small fraction of society, which just is gone. They just don't care anymore. So the establishment wants people in one of these four buckets. As long as people are in the left wing and the right wing, apathetic and isolationist, or domestic terrorists, the establishment wins. Again, to emphasize this, left and right, pro and anti-fighting, that's wonderful for the establishment. They got 50% of the people taken care of right there. Then they got the other 49.9% of people given up. But then they also have another 0.1% of the people they know they're going to fly off the handle at any point, and they'll create a domestic terrorist situation, which gives the establishment establishment the rationale to say, hey, we need to shut down social media. We need to curtail free speech. We need to broadly take away all weapons from everyone. Forgetting that in places like China and Japan and Korea, there are mass stabbings, by the way. No one writes about mass stabbings. I think in Japan, several years ago, a guy went and stabbed like 40 people and injured another 80 people, killed 40 people, stabbed them. So when you consider this from a systems approach, these are the 4 buckets the establishment wants you in. And I hope everyone's understanding this, because from a systems perspective, if we are in one of these 4 buckets, we are essentially being corralled into a controlled reaction. As long as you're in one of these 4 buckets, you are in the element of the ruling class, and they have you pegged. They know what you're going to do, and it's a pretty good game. All right, so what's the way out? So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about what is the way out. The Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health has identified the way out, and the way out is to build a movement. What does that mean? What does that really mean? Build a movement means working people understand historically that we don't have to be left-wing, we don't have to be right-wing, we don't have to be isolationist. It's grossly irresponsible to become a domestic terrorist and take ridiculous actions. In fact, it leads to the suppression of a movement. Ultimately, a movement is going to come when people understand these 4 buckets exist, but understand the dynamics. There is a science, and that's why I have the scrolling bar running over and over and over again. And I keep telling everyone, go to vashiva.com/join. And I've made this curriculum accessible to people so we understand the science of systems. It's many ways a science of everything. All right. So remember to emphasize this again. What does the establishment not want? The establishment does not want an educated citizenry who thinks beyond left and right. Now, in order to think beyond left and right, you need to have a different framework, which is the science of systems. The establishment doesn't want to ever solve a problem. They don't really want to solve gun violence. They want people being in the pro-gun camp and anti-gun camp. They don't want people to understand the root cause of gun violence, which we discussed. And I hope you guys take the course so you can go through that. But they don't want people going ever to the root cause, because the root cause will unify the working class. They want the working class, one element of the working class being pro-gun, another one being anti-gun, one being pro-climate, anti-climate, whatever you want on every issue. They don't want people going to the using system science to understand the real issue. So that's one thing to understand. They do not want an educated citizenry who wants to identify real problems by innovating real solutions. Now, they also do not want an educated citizenry who unites beyond left and right to build a movement. So I'm going to give you a little bit of understanding right now by looking at health, going back to the 1900s very briefly, and we do this greater in our course. That's why I want all of you guys to take the course, because I can't do it in this short video here. Otherwise, it'll get too long. But the bottom line is that when you look at the arc of history that I spoke in the video, ultimately, it is when you as an individual raise your consciousness. It's not about me teaching you something, but you raise your consciousness and you interconnected things that you see around you to understand the real problems and innovate real solutions. That's when things happen. And when you do it in the community of other people, it can happen faster. And that has happened historically. So let me give you an example here. So if you go look back at the 1900s, the measles mortality rate was around 14 out of 100,000. By 1945, right here, the measles rate had dropped by nearly 98%. Measles vaccine is over here 18 years later, but 18 years before the measles vaccine came, the measles infectious disease rate had dropped. Look at that. How did this happen? This massive decline happened because something profound took place during this period. And what took place during this period was a lot of infrastructure got put into place. That infrastructure during this period was hygiene, water systems, highways. We eliminated child labor. A lot of amazing things occurred during this period. During this period, infrastructure came in for working people, school systems, water systems, food systems, clean water. And these systems, long before the vaccines even came, brought down measles mortality by 98%, 18 years before. How did that happen? Did those in power, did the ruling class simply eliminate child labor? Did they simply give people the 8-hour workday? Did they clean up factory conditions? Did they clean up water systems? Did that just happen? And no one wants to talk about this, but I will share with you when you take a systems approach, this is what actually happened. There was massive advance of the labor movement. And you can see it started in the mid-1800s. You had the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association that began petitioning for the 10-hour workday. They had in 1871, after the Great Chicago Fire, Mary Harris Mother Jones began working as a labor organizer. In 1903, Women's Trade Unions Leagues built up at the AFL Convention, and so on. Women, starting in the mid-1800s all the way to the early 1900s, led these working class movements, and they came together beyond left and right. These were bottoms-up movements, beyond left and right, beyond being an isolationist, beyond doing terrorism. People realized that wasn't going to get anywhere because those in power have far more weapons, but we needed to build a bottoms-up movement, a conscious movement, an educated movement. And these movements came bottoms-up. People organized. organized, they studied, they understand what it took to build a movement. The book System and Revolution looks back at all those movements and it advances this in the modern world. And the word revolution is a scientific term. It's not go get weapons and burn down things. It's not what that means. It means revolution is a state transition. It's a physics term, and I define it here. So it was these movements. It was people organizing, left and right, men and women, black and white, coming together, uniting, not being in left-wing bucket, right-wing bucket, not being isolationist, not being depressed, not being domestic terrorists, but actually building a movement as brothers and sisters. And that's what the establishment doesn't want. And when you look at these movements, as these movements built, as they grew, at one point there were really bottoms-up unions that organized. And this scared the hell out of the left wing and the right wing. And this graph that I'm going to show you here is quite profound, because what you see here in this graph is starting in 1940 all the way to 1970, many of those movements were still alive. And you can see the number of strikes that took place. So between 1940 to around early 80s, each one of these bars shows the thousands of workers. So this was millions of people, working people, fighting for their rights. Millions of working people. And during this period, 1940 to 1970, this was when the GDP of the United States was growing, because people were out there organized, not taking guns and shooting at each other, but organized, united. As the US GDP grew, wages of working people also grew. What happened during this period in 1950, when people said statements like workers unite, working people come together? A guy called McCarthy branded that slogan as communist and socialist. So if you ever said workers unite, the right wing branded that as communist, when the slogan workers unite has been around long before Karl Marx. And by that branding, what they did was they went after anyone who said that and labeled them as communist. And a lot of ignorant people still do that. In fact, when we said workers unite or working people, oh, you must be communist. If you look at Karl Marx's observations, some of them were on the mark, some of them were not. But the reality is he doesn't own the word workers unite. But so during that period, the right wing attacked these movements by branding them as communist. And what the left wing did was they used that opening because they didn't like bottoms up movements. And then they created these top down unions. The unions we have today came out of the post McCarthy era, which were top down. So the Democrats controlled the unions and the Republicans were cutting off the legs of workers. And both of them did it together. So what you see in this graph is by 1980, the real bottoms up workers movements were destroyed in the United States, and you had less and less strikes. And during this period from 1980 to 2019, guess what happened? According to the RAND report, massive transfer of wealth took place between the working people to the elites. In fact, by way of example, if you are making about $50,000 today, you should actually be making $120,000. If you multiplied that by all the working people during this period, this 50-year period, that would be close to $47 trillion of wages was transferred from working people to the elites. In fact, in the last 2 years, 600 billionaires doubled their wealth by $2.3 trillion in the midst of this quote-unquote pandemic. So we don't discuss all this. So when you really look at this graph, you have to realize when we had movements, wages grew. When we stopped fighting, building movements, wages went down. And by way of example, you can see it that during this period, the first period, there were 52 million workers striking, 11,000 strikes. During this period, only 7 million workers struck, and there were only 962 strikes. So 962 strikes, people's wages goes down. During this, people's wages goes up. So I hope I'm being clear here. We need to build a movement. And the movement is not about, I want my guns, I'm going to go, I'm a big guy. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of a decentralized citizenry, everyone being trained, frankly. And I'm also a proponent of working people need basic needs, which goes beyond left and right. But the bottom line is the real weapon here is a weapon of knowledge to understand we need to build a movement. And that weapon of knowledge is the science of systems. As you can see from this graph, the establishment is in a very powerful position now because there are no movements. The unions have sold out working people. Anytime you say workers unite, oh, that's socialist. Most people don't even know. Most people haven't even read the Communist Manifesto. Have they, Ken? John? No. Yeah. Most people haven't even read Das Kapital. Most people haven't even read Adam Smith's work. So you have the right wing just putting out certain words and the left wing putting out certain isms, and no one even knows what the hell they're talking about. But the bottom line is the data is absolutely clear. When working people build movements, wages go up, working people have better lifestyle. When working people sit on their ass and get manipulated by the left and right, we're in this situation that we are in today. These are the facts. You can see from this graph that as long as we don't actually build a movement, we're going to be in the situation we are today.